Hey guys, welcome back. This is the story about what if Naruto was a hollow. Before we start, please subscribe to the channel and like the video as well, it really means a lot. So let's start the what if. After his humiliating defeat at the hands of that other Aaronkar that he couldn't identify, Ichigo almost fell into yet another depression. This one had the potential to be even worse than his last one, because of the sheer circumstances that accompanied it. He had trained for an entire month to control his hollow and gain new visored powers, but what happened in the end? Were his visored powers really worth anything? He had gotten demolished yet again, even with the boost. And the Aaronkar he had been fighting didn't look at all winded in the end. Even with all the power-ups, he was still weak. He had to be saved in the end, first by Rukia, and then by Shinji. There was no greater amount of shame that Ichigo was feeling. He should be protecting them, not the other way around. Unfortunately for him, or fortunately, he didn't have the time to be depressed. Not with what had happened right under their noses. Not with the emergency situation that had just gone down with the Shinigami team in Karakura. Ichigo had just finished healing up when that happened, and had gotten a brief report from Hitsugaya explaining the situation in full detail. As it turned out, his dear friend Inu Oriheim was currently missing. But that couldn't be right. He had felt Inu's Ryatsu this morning, and his wounds were perfectly healed. There was not a scar on him, and there was only one person who could do that in such a short period of time. After he had groggily fallen out of his bed, the orange-haired teenager had been dragged off to Oriheim's house, apparently to discuss the situation with the Captain Commander via the anti-Aaronkar Shinigami team's communication network. Overall, the air in the room was a deathly serious one, even after all the Shinigami on the team had gathered there. The giant screen monitor in the back of the room was still filled with static, signifying that they were not connected. The group of Shinigami watched with bated breath as the screen finally went from static to a much more clear image, and they saw someone they weren't expecting to see behind the monitor. Or rather, two people they weren't expecting to see. One was Yukitake Jushiro, and the other was Namikaze Minato. Hitsugaya was the first one to recover, and he looked over the two captains, vaguely disappointed that the Captain Commander wasn't there. Yukitake and Namikaze. "Where's the So Taishu?" asked Hitsugaya. The others looked on in confusion, their eyes glued to the display of the two captains on screen. "We were asked to come in his place," Yukitake explained. Hitsugaya looked at him suspiciously, though not because he distrusted the captains, but because he was wary of the reason itself. "For what reason?" he asked. Yukitake looked down for a moment. "Because I was the last one to see Inu Oriheim, before she entered the Senkamen on her trip to the living world," Yukitake said, the serious nature of his words causing Ichigo and Rukia's eyes to widen. "Judging by your reaction, I take it Inu Oriheim never appeared in the real world," he assumed. Hitsugaya took the opportunity to nod, while Ichigo spoke up frantically. "Where did Ina disappear to? Do you know anything about what happened, Yukitake-san?" Yukitake closed his eyes, almost in shame of what he was about to say. "I'll tell you our version of the story. The two guards who escorted her through the gate came back here alive, and according to their testimony, it is believed that Inu Oriheim was captured or possibly killed by the Aaronkar." Ichigo was about to yell out at Yukitake in alarm and surprise, to tell him that it was impossible, but Hitsugaya beat him to the punch. "Stop it, nothing good will come from arguing about this matter. What I really want to know is, what are you doing here, Namikaze?" the young captain asked, addressing the newly instated captain of the 5th Division. Minato looked a lot less somber than Yukitake or anyone in Oriheim's room, but with such grave news he at least had the decency to look respectful in their presence. "Well, Hitsugaya Taishu, I am here for a much less severe reason. As you know, the main perpetrator behind this entire incident with the Aaronkar is the former captain of the 5th Division. And as such, most of the responsibility for the incident falls on the 3rd, 5th, and 9th Divisions. I'm here to collect information on any Aaronkar, particularly those in the Espada," he explained. "Minato-san, you're taking responsibility for this?" Ichigo piped up. Minato smirked at the boy from behind the monitor, placing a hand behind his head. It's not that big of a job as you might think. My responsibilities pretty much just involve compiling a list of new information on various Arrancar, as well as the 3 renegade captains, and make the data presentable to the 12th Division. So, that after we defeat Aizen and the Arrancar, we'll be more ready for something like this should the remaining Arrancar try to retaliate. He paused for a moment, mulling over what he was about to say. Hitsugaya took the opportunity to speak. But unfortunately, we still have limited information on the Arrancar. We only know the name of one Espada, and his general abilities are still an unknown factor to us. While we've managed to compile a list on the standard abilities every Arrancar possesses, Arrancar have abilities that individually vary, so those figures aren't an accurate list on the capabilities of each Arrancar. Hitsugaya said, butting in on the conversation. So, you weren't able to get any more information, after all? Minato said. He looked a little disappointed. No, the second attack on the real world just showed an Arrancar that we've already previously identified. The others hardly fought at all or defeated their opponents too swiftly. The one that I fought was the single Espada we've identified. Grimjow Jigerjax, though there's a problem with this information. Apparently, Jigerjax is not even an Espada anymore, though that didn't prevent me from being unable to match him. Yukitake and Minato's eyes widened significantly, as they stared at the captain in disbelief. A captain being defeated was no small feat, and to know that Aizen had several of these Arrancar. I see. That is disheartening, Minato said. It truly was disheartening. They had expected to win this war fairly easily, as the Arrancar hadn't advanced much according to their calculations. With Arrancar this powerful though, this war could be won by either side. Excuse me, Minato-san, there's something I would like to say. Ichigo spoke up, his fists clenched at his side. As much as he hated to admit it, he had information to report. Information on an incredibly strong Arrancar that he had fought and lost to. Oriheim's situation could come a little later. What is it, Kurosaki-san? Minato asked, and all eyes were focused on him. I fought a new Arrancar this time around, one that was incredibly strong, he stated, as he clenched his fists in anger and shame as he remembered what happened. Minato and Yukitake looked at each other in unease. Really? This could change everything. What is your information on this particular Arrancar? Yukitake piped up, voicing the question that seemed to be on everyone's mind. He didn't tell me his name, and he didn't tell me if he was a member of the Espada, but I've gotten the grasp of what his power is like. He's far stronger than Grimjow is, far, far stronger. I couldn't do a thing against him, even with my newfound power. Ichigo said. Minato stroked his chin. This is a frustrating situation. Every time we get a chance to gather information on any of these Arrancar, we always come up short. It's like they're actively trying to keep themselves undercover. Minato commented. They most likely are. Aizen is an intelligent man, and he knows we'll be trying to keep tabs on him and his Arrancar. He'll be sure to keep us from getting a plethora of information on any of them, Yukitake added. That's not all. According to a specific ally that was there at the time, I heard a couple more things about this Arrancar, but it's so confusing. I don't know what they're supposed to mean, Ichigo said. Now everyone was looking at him in confusion. They didn't question him on who the specific ally was, but they were curious about this new information about the Arrancar. What exactly did you hear? Minato asked, a little wary of the answer for some reason. He couldn't settle this sinking feeling in his gut. He knew it was something he didn't want to hear. Well, I'm thinking there was some kind of previous relationship between this Arrancar and this friend of mine. They seem to have fought before a long time ago, and I heard the Arrancar be called Vulpes C or something like that. He explained. Something in Minato froze at that exact moment, as the memories from around 100 years ago began resurfacing. The day that had been the worst day of his life, and the worst day of their life for all his friends and family. The day when Konohagakure no Sato was destroyed, and all efforts were poured forth into investigating its demise. His own former captain and former Captain Urahara Kasuke all put forth their efforts to find the culprit behind the organized hollow attack on Konoha. All their evidence pointed towards one single hollow, and the guilt was all but confirmed. The hollow Vulpes C was thought of to be the linchpin behind Konoha's destruction. "Minato-kun, is that?" Yukitake said to his fellow captain, whose eyes were downcast and blank. The Shinigami on the other side of the monitor looked confused at the sudden change in mood. The name Konoha was thrown around once. That's something I also didn't understand. Ichigo finished tentatively, and that tore it for Naruto. He lifted his head and stared forward with an intense flurry of anger. He was even growling a little bit. Every Shinigami on the other side of the monitor flinched and stepped backward, even if Minato's anger wasn't directed at him. "I'll tell you what it means right now." Minato hissed in righteous anger, all the feelings that he had for his home village coming back in full force, even long after they had been buried. He clenched his fists at his side, so hard that his knuckles turned chalk white, and his fingernails began to draw blood. "The name Konoha, it is the name of the village where I was born in the real world. Geographically speaking, it and the rest of the landmass I am from is hidden from the rest of the world by something called a genjutsu, or at least it was." He trailed off, and the others were paying rapt attention to the 5th Division's captain. "Around 100 years ago, my home village was destroyed and its inhabitants disappeared off the face of the earth. My captain and Urahara-san investigated the operation behind the invasion, and the hollow at the center of the operation was purportedly Vulpes C," he said. "To learn that this hollow is a subordinate of Aizen's is terrible news. According to the 9th Division's database, he is one of the most dangerous hollows in existence, mainly for his elusiveness. He has eluded the Shinigami for almost 3 centuries, starting from his time as an Aegis. He has only been active in the real world a total of 3 times, not including his most recent incursion. However, his inactivity does not make him any less dangerous. His actions are always violent and worrisome. He always operates on a large scale, and after that he always go back to hiding within Huecomundo. Due to lack of progress on the Garganta, we have not found a way to pursue him, but if we could get into Huecomundo, one of the top priorities would be to bring this hollow down. Minato-kun, this hollow, if he is one of Aizen's minions." Yukitake piped up. Minato nodded. "Yeah, I've thought about this possibility as well. It makes the situation that much worse," Minato stated. "What do you mean?" Ichigo asked. "At a point sometime in the past, Vulpes C was capable of mobilizing an attack force of at least 100,000 hollows for his invasion of Konoha. It's not out of the realm of possibility to assume that he still has that much power. If he is one of Aizen's minions, then he could effectively call that attack force at any given time," Minato said grimly. Ichigo's eyes widened, and his breath caught in his throat. 100,000 hollows. That's insane. How are we supposed to fight that? He shouted. "Are you serious, Namikaze?" Hitsugaya shouted, his nerves getting the best of him. Minato nodded, sparing no thought to what was at stake here. "Now, hold up everyone. It's too early for us to say for sure whether or not Vulpes C is a subordinate of Aizen. You did not figure out that he was an Espada, correct?" Minato asked Ichigo, who nodded awkwardly. He could be affiliated with Aizen in a different manner. Right now, the best option is to acknowledge both Aizen and Vulpes C as separate threats. Minato finished. "Then what are we waiting for? We need to bring this guy down, stat," Hitsugaya said. Yukitake shook his head somberly, and Hitsugaya relented underneath the pressure. "Field research for the Garganta is still underway, and is unfortunately making slow progress. We were planning to invade Huecomundo sometime within the next 10 years, but with the Aizen incident, that is no longer an option. There is no possible way we can stabilize a Garganta before winter arrives." The conversation was about to continue in the same direction, but someone else wanted to change the subject. "Minato-san, Yukitake-san." Ichigo was speaking now, and both captains turned to look at him. "I understand that this hollow is very dangerous, and I understand that he needs to be brought to justice for his crime, but we're still missing our friend. I need to know more about what happened to Inu. Ichigo said seriously. Yukate's eyes widened slightly, before he looked at Minato. The former Yandame's anger had faded completely from his visage, and he nodded at Yukate. Well, we're still at the conclusion that she has either been captured or killed by the Eren car. Yukate admitted. Ichigo glared lightly at him, before he stuck his arm out. The completely healed nature of the appendage threw the Shinigami for a loop, at least the ones that knew he had battled yesterday. Look at this. My arm was seriously injured from the battle yesterday, so badly that no one else here could heal it. When I woke up this morning, there wasn't even a scar on my arm, and I could even feel a bit of Inu's Ryatsu. Ichigo explained. His voice was strangely calm for once. The room fell silent, and Yukate was staring at Ichigo in shock. This completely blew Soul Society's theory on her disappearance out of the water. I see, that is certainly a shame, came a new voice. Yukate and Minato turned around, and they immediately gave clearance for Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni to lead the conversation. What does that mean? Asked Ichigo, as he leaned forward. If what you're saying is true, then it indeed means that Inu Orihime is alive. However, at the same time it also means that she is a traitor. If she were kidnapped, then she would not have the ability to see you before she disappeared. The fact that she healed your wounds and then disappeared means that she went to Huecomundo of her own free will, Yamamoto said. That's Ludi, Ichigo began to shout, but someone stopped him. He turned around to see that Rinji had placed a hand on his shoulder. Stop, continuing to talk will only worsen your argument. I understand, so Taishu. Then I, Abarai Rinji, Vice Captain of the 6th Division and a member of Hitsugaya Taishu's anti-Eren forces will respond to this treason by heading to Huecomundo and bringing Inu Orihime to her senses. Denied, said the Captain Commander, to the shock of both Ichigo and Rinji. The Eren forces are already preparing for battle. I will have Hitsugaya's team return to Soul Society to prepare for the upcoming battle, he ordered. Does that mean you're telling us to forget about Inu? Rukia piped up. Naturally. You cannot weigh the life of one person against the fate of the world. Luckily, I made preparations in case of your resistance. Yamamoto said, as a gate to Soul Society suddenly materialized, and from the inside came Kachiki Byakuya and Zaraki Kenpachi. The two captains stepped into the room, looking profoundly intimidating in the face of what was for the most part inferior Shinigami. Go back, all of you, Kenpachi said bluntly. Do not resist. We were ordered to use force if necessary. Byakuya added. Ichigo clenched his fists, as all the Shinigami were been corralled back to Soul Society. He grit his teeth, before he said one last thing to the Captain Commander. I understand. I will not ask for Soul Society's help. Just please, tell me how to get to Huecomundo. Inu's our friend. I will save her by myself. He said. Yamamoto opened his eyes slightly, a sure sign that danger was approaching. Denied, he said, again to the shock of Ichigo. Your strength will be of importance in the upcoming war, and as of now there is no way to get into Huecomundo. I will not have you be affiliated with Urahara Kasuke or anyone not allied with Soul Society who could possibly allow you into Huecomundo, where you will die like a dog. You will wait until you receive orders. That is all. With those final words said, the screen faded to black, and the connection between the two worlds was cut. Ichigo clenched his fists while staring ahead, and Rukia looked at him one last time before she passed into the gate. Naruto locked eyes with Inu Orihime for the first time ever, as she was brought back to Las Noches, and he already knew that she was wary of him. He didn't look a day older than the 16-year-old human girl, but just the way he carried himself set her on edge, unlike anything she had ever felt before. To her, his existence was an ancient, soul-rending monstrosity. It basked in evil and pain, and when one was looking at him it was all directed there. Not even Aizen made Orihime feel this way, and that man had a strength-draining Ryatsu. Welcome to our castle, Las Noches. Aizen said from atop of his throne. Orihime still looked nervous in the presence of Aizen, even if he didn't inspire the same feeling that Naruto did. Ulquiorra, Grimmjow, and Yami also stood in the throne room, waiting to reap the reward that they would get from successfully completing their mission. Still, no one took as much interest in Orihime as Naruto did. He stared at her the entire time, knowing that she was going to be the trigger for the Kurosaki kid to come to Hueco It wasn't the fact that it was him coming to Hueco but rather the action of him coming to Hueco He didn't like it, the Shinigami having access to their own personal dimension. That meant he would have to make sure that Kurosaki would never be able to leave, lest he figure out the secret of the Garganta. You are Inu Orihime, correct? Aizen asked rhetorically, continuing on when Orihime didn't say anything. I'm sorry to ask you this so soon, but I would like you to demonstrate your ability right now. He stated. In order to test your abilities, I'd like you to heal Grimmjow's left arm. Aizen explained. Orihime, for all she worth, walked up to Grimmjow, even despite the fact that she felt like all her power was being sucked out of her. There was the moment Naruto was waiting for. He was giddy, he knew the human girl's power could be used for this. Grimmjow could take his place within the Espada yet again. Aizen probably just got tired of me killing all the new Septimas. Naruto thought, as Orihime placed her hands over where Grimmjow had gotten his arm severed. Grimmjow had the decency to look surprised as a golden aura covered his missing arm. Soten Kishun. I reject, she whispered with the voice of someone who had had her will broken. Slowly but surely, Naruto's grin widened as the pieces of Grimmjow's missing arm began to come back into existence, forming an unblemished whole like it was before. When it was all said and done, Grimmjow stood there, complete with a fresh new left arm. He flexed it and tested out its new grip on his Zanpakuto, confirming that it was just as good as it was before. Naruto grinned. Time and space reversal was such a wonderful weapon to have, but he doubted he would need this girl again. Aizen looked vaguely pleased, but Naruto knew the whole plot behind this had nothing to do with Orihime's power. Too bad I switched the information in the archives a while back. Soul Society wants nothing more to do with Urahara Kasuke, so no captains are getting here anytime soon. Making Aizen look like a fool was something he enjoyed most, and since he had command of Sail, he could easily make it look like Urahara Kasuke had gotten back into good graces with Soul Society for the upcoming war, when in reality he hadn't at all. Hey, woman! Grimmjow said, drawing Naruto out of his trance. Heal this too. He stated, pointing to a spot on his back. His Espada tattoo had been burned off completely, and new scar tissue had formed over it. But that too disappeared in the face of Orihime's power, and soon enough the jagged number 7 tattoo on his back was visible to everyone. He chuckled to himself a little, before it turned into full-blown laughter at his rank being returned to him. His jubilance was reflected on Naruto's face, who was glad that the Espada were finally completed again. Naruto stared at Orihime again. Maybe it was time for him to mess with her a little bit. He grinned psychotically. It would almost be too much fun for him to do that. Later that evening, Orihime had gotten outfitted with her new Aaronkar clothes, and was taken to her own personal cell on the other side of Las Noches. She stood there on the Middle Eastern-style rug, staring through the bars of her cell on the crescent Hueco moon. Such a fine moon, isn't it? It really instills a lot of bloodlust within me. Naruto's voice rang out, as the door to the cell creaked open slowly. Orihime gasped when she saw who it was, walking into the room. You! Orihime stuttered out, as she locked eyes with the Aaronkar yet again. She backed away from him as far as she possibly could, pushing into the corner and praying that the Aaronkar would go away. Ulquiorra's busy right now, so I figured I'd be the one to come check up on how you're doing. He said casually, despite the fact that the girl in front of him was terrified. He thrived on fear though, and it was almost like he was draining it from her. It took everything in her power not to throw up right there, because this Aaronkar's Ryatsu had a bad aura. A very bad aura. Blood, pain, murder, torture, they all seemed to be reflected in the Ryatsu. What are you? Orihime managed to squeak out. Naruto grinned, and he released the force of his Ryatsu. The girl buckled underneath her own weight and collapsed to the floor. She shrieked as she gasped for breath, sweat pouring down her temples. She tried to lift her head to look at Naruto, but her mind saw only a shadowy figure, a midnight black demon that had no outline. His soulless white eyes seemed to reflect nothing but a monster. My name's not important right now. What I am isn't important either. All that matters right now is what's going to happen in the future, Naruto said, forcibly dragging Orihime to her feet. Orihime-chan, you are really not worth anything, he said, once again with his casual tone of voice. He mildly noted that his Ryatsu and his presence had instilled mild paralysis in the girl. I'll tell you this right now, don't bother trying to use your powers to destroy the Hogyoku, he said simply. Orihime's eyes widened, and she gasped in shock as the plan she had was unveiled like that. You poor girl, you still think Aizen needs you for that, don't you? When the Hogyoku is used excessively, it enters a state of disrepair and must be brought back to its original state, correct? Naruto shook his head, placing his hands on Orihime's cheeks and squeezing firmly. Tears flowed from Orihime's eyes, and she wanted nothing more than to slap this Aaronkar. Your friends will come here, to Huecomundo, Naruto said suddenly, changing the subject completely. Orihime's mind suddenly went blank, and she had trouble registering what he had just said. What did you say? Naruto grinned. I said, your friends will be coming here, to Huecomundo. You are more than enough bait to draw them here to Huecomundo. They will surely come here using Urahara Kasuke's Garganta, he said. Why? She asked, hopelessly. To rescue you, obviously. They don't need any other reason than that to come here. However, that should mean nothing to you now, you live here now, and your body and soul already belong to Aizen-sama. Naruto spit out Aizen's honorific like it was poison. After that, Naruto looked whimsical for a second. He breathed deeply and sighed in happiness. That boy will be coming here, no doubt. Being his friend, I would say you definitely know his potential, am I right? Naruto asked rhetorically. Orihime looked confused at that, and she said nothing in spite of herself. You don't? That's surprising. I thought someone like Kurosaki would tell his closest friends that at least. Or does he keep everything from you, guarding it like the dirty little secret it is, he said. No, that's not. He really shouldn't be ashamed of who he is. I mean sure, I was surprised when I first saw what species he truly was, but in the end I started to like him more. Maybe it was because he's less of a Shinigami now? I don't know. Naruto trailed off. Well, it doesn't matter at this point in time. He's dead the second he enters this place, and I will personally kill himself if he runs into me. Slowly and painfully, while he screams your name out in agony. That's the only real way to do things. It will be fun, he said. Orihime, for all she worth, managed to get a hold of herself, and she rushed forward and slapped Naruto. All she managed to do was succeed in hurting her hand. Naruto's face remained unbudged. The grin that adorned it only got wider as Orihime cried out in pain. Luckily for her, her fingers hadn't gotten mangled. Naruto smirked as the human girl clutched her wounded hand, before he turned around and walked out the door. He clutched the side of it, looking back at the girl who was sure to wallow in depression from this news. Try not to get too depressed on me, but then again, that might be fun, he said evilly, before he walked out of the door. After he left, Orihime broke down completely. Urahara Kasuke stood outside his shop in the middle of the night, smoking his pipe peacefully. In truth, he was waiting for someone very important to arrive there. Welcome. I thought you'd be here by now, Kurosaki-san. He commented, as the orange-haired Shinigami himself walked up to the Urahara shop, clad in his Shinigami clothes. Why would you think that? Ichigo asked. You probably thought that I was the only one who knew the way to Huecomundo, and, well, let's just say that you guessed correctly. I already have everything set up for your trip, he said, as he turned his back to Ichigo and gestured for him to enter the store. As the two descended in the deeper part of the Urahara shop, the rocky area where Ichigo had begun his Shinigami training, Urahara admitted something. I always feared that Aizen would take interest in Inu-san's ability, that's why I tried to have her removed from this battle. But I didn't take her feelings into consideration, and that plan backfired spectacularly. Now, he trailed off, as they walked through the craggy area. I want to assist you in any way possible. You sure that's okay? It would be going against Soul Society's orders, Ichigo said in concern. Well, going against Soul Society's orders is the exact reason I reside here now. Besides that, Soul Society has already wiped their hands of me for this war. They don't want anything more to do with me now. For what reason I cannot fathom. That's a pretty pathetic expression you've got there, Kurosaki. Came a voice that was sitting upon a large rock overhead. Ichigo turned around, and noticed his friend and enemy, Ishida Uryu, sitting on the rock. The same one that had helped him invade Soul Society was apparently going to help him with Huecomundo as well. Ishida, why are you here? Ichigo asked, before he felt another presence enter his peripheral vision. Obviously, to enter Huecomundo with you, Ichigo. Ichigo turned around, and to his surprise he saw another of his friends. Sato Yasutora was also present in the underground of the Urahara, apparently ready to enter Huecomundo as well. We heard everything from Urahara-san. We're coming too, he said in a voice that brooked no arguments. He looked prepared for the journey as well. Ishida. Chad. Ichigo began, and the other two already knew what he was going to say. I appreciate and understand your feelings, but it's better that I go alone on this. With your powers. He was cut off suddenly as Chad struck the end of his Zanpakuto with his powered-up arm. Despite that, it wasn't the normal arm that Ichigo was so used to. The design on it was far different, and it packed much more of a punch that Ichigo could ever remember. Are you saying that even this isn't enough, Ichigo? He said in his usual calm voice. Ishida looked on them passively, though on the internal level he agreed with Chad. Trust us, Ichigo. Don't force yourself to carry this heavy burden by yourself. We can all carry it with our combined strength, because that is what friends are for, explained Chad. It seemed like those words, and the demonstration of Chad's powers finally got through to Ichigo. He frowned lightly, and looked like he still wanted to argue, but he conceded in the end when Urahara came up to them. The three young humans stood at attention, mentally preparing themselves for whatever was in store in Huecomundo. Alright then. Everybody ready? Urahara asked. The middle of Huecomundo was thrown into a slight uproar as a base far away from Las Noches collapsed on itself, and a ragtag band of three teenagers surfaced, coughing up a large supply of sand. They had gotten their first taste of Huecomundo down there in the base, and with an easy battle they were getting pumped for the real challenge. Well, we got out somehow, Ichigo voiced, as he dragged himself to his feet. The orange-haired Shinigami looked around, feeling slightly surprised by the lack of hollow activity. Huecomundo was otherwise a very desolate place. So, this is Huecomundo, huh? Seems kinda lonely here, to be honest. And here I was thinking that the world of hollows would be a pigsty, he commented. The quartz trees and the sand dunes were the only things setting apart this area from a flat, empty landscape. There was something about this place that put Ichigo on edge though, like there was more to this place than met the eye. Ichigo and Ishida surveyed the various qualities of the Huecomundo frontier, but Chad wasn't paying any attention to the scenery at all. He was busy pointing ahead at the bizarre palace that looked like it was only a short distance in front of them. Is that Las Noches? The one the Aaron car were talking about? It's so big, I think it's throwing off my sense of distance, Ichigo commented, as he turned around to view the palace. Anyway, for the time being, it's probably best to assume that Inu is within that building somewhere. It's likely. I don't know of any other place where they could hide her. Ishida agreed, himself being unaware of the vast size of Huecomundo, and its many different locales. We should run there, Ichigo said. Chad and Ishida nodded. The three intruders of Huecomundo took off running to the palace, but even when they were completely out of breath, the palace never seemed any closer. The three humans laid in the sand of Huecomundo, gasping and panting for breath. A little hollow lizard emerged from underneath the sand, and Ichigo looked at it blankly. Are you sure that place isn't a mirage or something? He asked. Impossible. A mirage can't even exist in a place like that. Shall I explain what a mirage is? Basically, Ishida started, before he was cut off by Ichigo yelling at him. While Ichigo yelled at Ishida, Chad clenched his fist together, seemingly focused on something that had drawn his attention away from his companions. He put his hands toward the ground, and narrowed his eyes slightly. Ichigo and Ishida continued to ramble on, but not after a giant, E-like hollow emerged from underneath the sand. Ichigo and company had the decency to look surprised, before a spotted hollow with a tiki mask and an ant-like hollow also emerged from the sand. They were chasing what appeared to be a toddler in a green rag, who was crying as she desperately ran from the group of hollow. A human? What's another human doing in a place like this? Ichigo asked, as he grabbed the hilt of his zanpakuto and drew it. The bandages unraveled and he held it out in front of him, ready to save the girl. The others jumped into action alongside him, and a few seconds later, the three hollows were incapacitated. They quivered in fear, but the girl they had saved spoke up. Stop! Stop it! Why are you bullying us? She cried, in a shaky lisp. Ichigo and the others looked bewildered as the girl that they had saved suddenly began to defend the hollows. A mask? Ichigo questioned, as the hood fell off the girl's head to reveal a cartoonish, broken mask that rested on her scalp. A few minutes later, and all of the hollows were on their knees. We're really sorry. We never thought that OU endless tag would cause such a misunderstanding. The little Arankar said. She proceeded to explain how they were playing a game of endless tag, and how she was a total masochist of all things. Yeah, Ichigo deadpanned, when it was all said and done. He had bopped the tiki-masked hollow when she called herself a masochist, but was now content to just stand there idly. And you are? I'm Nell. Nell too, the Arankar, she said. Naruto sheathed his zanpakuto, feeling the new power run through him. The final stages of preparation were complete, and the Hogyoku was fully awakened. He was standing in Sail's wing, running through the final tests that would allow him to break Aizen's Shurikai. He turned to the Novena Espada, who grinned at him loftily. So, everything's done then? He asked Sail. Of course, that theory you had on your shinobi genjutsu held quite a bit of water. You should be able to break Aizen-sama's illusions via a similar approach of what you did there. The hard part will be directing your Ryatsu to the afflicted areas, so it's a little different than how you described genjutsu cancellation. We're ready, we just need you to say the word. Though, may I ask something, Naruto? Sail said. Naruto nodded at him. That boy who invaded, will he have any bearing on the plan? Sort of. I've taken an interest in him ever since I saw this new power of his in the real world, so I'm gonna go out and meet him. We can have a little fun with the intruders, and then initiate the plan. Aizen's no idiot, he knows I've been up to something since the beginning, and he'll be ready for me. He's also the only one who knows the gateway to Soul Society. We need to have that remain open, and you have to analyze and reproduce the effect for whenever we're ready for our invasion. That shouldn't be too hard, Sail remarked. He strolled over to the main database, pulling up a few images on screen. The three intruders had somehow multiplied in number. There was one more Shinigami with them, as well as two hollows and a childlike Arankar. The group had just penetrated into the palace right now, and were in the Aruina's subterranean section of it. Well, isn't this interesting? Our little intruders have stumbled upon someone very interesting. Sail mused, as he smirked at the static display of the group of 7. Let me see, Naruto muttered, as he muscled Sail out of the way. He narrowed his eyes, those were unwelcome faces around these parts. He sneered. Is that? He asked. The little green-haired girl on the orange boy's back had since gotten a haircut since they last met, but she bore a striking resemblance to the one he had cast out all those years ago. It's Neliel, and her fraction, Sail said lightly. Naruto growled in anger, baring his vulpine teeth. This threw the plans slightly off. He would have to take care of her for real this time. He looked at the others in the group, before he centered in on the newest arrival. His eyes widened, and his breath actually quickened. Not out of fear, but rather out of excitement. He knew that mask from anywhere. A Shinigami, with gravity-defying gray hair and a mask covering everything except one eye. Kakashi. He muttered, as a lunatic smile made its way onto his face. Naruto shook in laughter, his hands grasping and scrapping against the glass of the monitor, like Naruto wanted to reach into the screen and clutch Kakashi's neck. He only struck solid glass. Change of plans, Sail. He moaned mysteriously, as he practically cracked his neck to stare back at Sail with wide, evil eyes. Sail felt a little intimidated by the gaze. There's someone down there that I want to personally kill, and with Neliel down there I'll have to take care of her, so there's a priority change. You can have the Quincy if you want, as long as it doesn't interfere with your preparations, he said. You have my thanks, Sail said. The Quincy would of course make an excellent test subject, if Naruto didn't randomly go out and kill him first. You could never predict what the Primera was going to do next. Just one thing. If they're entering Las Noches that way, then there's only one possible destination for them to take. A very interesting destination, Naruto said. He shook his head. They're inevitably going to pass through the Trace Cifra's den, Naruto mused. He let out a sneering laugh. Why is this important? Do you think they'll lose there? Asked Sail. The Priveron were fairly powerful, of course, but Aizen had told them to not underestimate the intruders. No, I imagine they'll manage to defeat the Priveron Espada without too much effort. But it's the Priveron Espada themselves that make this so interesting, Naruto chuckled. Sail raised an eyebrow, but otherwise said nothing. Get started. We're abandoning this palace today to move towards eastern Huecomundo, but we can't leave without the Hogyoku and the stabilization of the portal. The Shinigami group had finally managed to infiltrate the Palace of Las Noches after a long hike through the barren desert. They had gotten some help from Nell's pet eel hollow, Bawabawa. They had been attacked on the way there by this giant sand hollow named Lunaganga, but they had been saved by a very familiar Shinigami who had managed to find his way into Huecomundo. Hatake Kakashi looked bored even as he struck down the gargantuan sand hollow. The Great Desert Brothers, as they called themselves, freaked out at the sight of another Shinigami, but eventually he too traveled with the group on Bawabawa as they made their way to Las Noches. Rukia and Rinji were prepared to come to Huecomundo after you, but I convinced them to return to Soul Society after I said I'd go in their place. So after that I went to the Urahara shop looking for you, but it seems you had already gone into Huecomundo, he had said, as the group got up right next to the giant marble palace of Las Noches. They busted in quickly after a little bit of arguing with Nell, and the group of 7 entered a ruinous area before they entered the main part of Las Noches. An intersection with 5 different hallways in another direction. All of them noticed the strength of the Ryatsu that was being emitted ahead, and frankly it made them a little nervous. There are 5 paths, and 4 of us here. That means we have no choice but to go down the path one at a time until we reach the end, and... Ishida began, but Kakashi cut him off. No, we should split up immediately, and search for Ina-san on our own. Kakashi advised. Ichigo looked at him like he was crazy. Are you crazy? We're up against the Espada here. The best option is obviously to stick together. He shouted. Kakashi didn't even blink at Ichigo's outburst. You forget, Ichigo, that the 4 of us are hardly coordinated to fight as a team. As much as I encourage teamwork, it doesn't look like it's going to matter with Ryatsu like that. And besides that, worrying about a warrior's life on the battlefield is an insult, he replied. Ichigo pursed his lips, before he turned away from the rest of the group. Fine, I get. We'll split up and look for Inu on our own, he said. The rest of the group smiled at him, before Kakashi sheepishly rubbed the back of his head and gave his trademark eye smile. If Renji were here, he'd probably do something along the lines of a cheesy, little chant to get us all pumped up. But I've got go talent or motivation to do that, so let's just get going, Kakashi mumbled. The four of them broke and each headed down a different hallway, leaving three confused hollows in their wake. After a little bit of protest by Nell, the little errand car was bolting after Ichigo, desperately trying to catch up to him. Her brothers looked at each other for a moment, before they actually forgot which door Nell had run down. They struggled with the decision for a little bit, and then head down a random path that they thought was the right one. Meanwhile, Ichigo ran through the corridors of the lower point of Las Noches, and he paused when he felt a presence come up from behind him. He turned around, and winced when he saw Nell clumsily chasing after him, crying and dripping snot. Ichigo! Nell wanted to the you again, Ichigo, she shouted, as she rushed to catch him in a tackling hug of sorts. The eyes of her mask lit up for a second, before she used Sonido to overwhelm Ichigo and slam into him with her mask. Ichigo lay there, collapsed as Nell cried into his chest. He sighed in both relief and exasperation, before he felt a presence hiding in the rafters directly above them. What's the matter, Ichigo? Nell asked, before Ichigo shushed her. Someone's here, he whispered, before he placed his hand on the hilt of his zanpakuto. Come out, he shouted up to the rafters, before he saw a flash of Sonido. The figure flashed through the rafters, Ichigo hot on his tail. Bastard, don't run. I told you to come out, he shouted, but the figure in the rafters only ignored him, and continued to move until they were in much less narrow room, where they could fight without restraint. Ichigo thought he caught a glimpse of red hair, but the errand car flashed away and slashed him quite easily, before appearing to the opposite of him. He heard Nell cry out, but was too focused on his opponent. Getsuga Tensho! Ichigo cried, using his Shirkai's special ability to fire a condensed slice of silvery blue Ryatsu at his opponent. The opponent who had his back towards him held his hand, blocking the attack and sending it elsewhere. He turned around, giving Ichigo a glimpse at his face. If that is all your strength, then it's not going to be fulfilling killing you, said a stoic voice, and Ichigo's eyes widened. Before him stood a fairly short errand car, around Naruto's height, with dull red hair. He was dressed in a normal errand car uniform, decorated with slightly longer sleeves that concealed his hands. His zanpakuto was on his back, a normal katana with a sand-yellow hilt and an eye-like guard. He had heavy-looking green eyes, with his mask fragments creating a raccoon-like burglar mask around them. There was a tattoo of a kanji on his forehead. Who are you? Ichigo sneered, as he didn't expect anyone below the Espada rank able to block his Shirkai. Arrancar Ciento Cinco, and Privaron Espada, my name is Sabaka no Gara, he said stoically, as he released his tan Ryatsu that gave off the consistency of the desert sand to Ichigo. Privaron Espada? Ichigo asked. Gara grunted at him, and held up a few fingers for Ichigo to look at. Not that it matters, but a Privaron Espada is an arrancar that was once among the Espada rank. I myself was once the Quinta Espada in Las Noches, but was since removed when someone stronger emerged. With that, Gara rushed into battle, his sword drawn against Ichigo's Shirkai. He had a very bizarre fighting style, filled with quick jabs and wide swings, but he was never reckless with his blade. He definitely had skills that were above a numeros. Whenever Ichigo attacked, he was blocked. But not by Gara's blade. Instead, Gara's remarkable arrow would hold through for him, and whenever Ichigo struck him, a few grains of Huecomundo sand would fall on the floor. What's with this toughness? He said. He wiped some of the sand off his blade, testing it in his hand. It was real. Hierro arenoso, Gara explained, taking a swipe at Ichigo with his zanpakuto. He didn't explain more than that, choosing to go yet again on the offensive. With a few sandy palm thrusts, Gara attacked Ichigo's zanpakuto, jarring his body through the shock wave that entered his zanpakuto. Ichigo jumped back, and Gaara took advantage of something. He stabbed his sword into the ground, cracking the tile floor and changing the layout of the battlefield. Ichigo couldn't help but look at his feet, and he failed to adjust to the change in footing. Gaara was on him when he showed this weakness, grabbing his robe and stabbing through his shoulder, while never losing the stoic look on his face. "It's not worth it," Gaara muttered, as he kicked Ichigo back into the wall. Gaara charged up a Tanjiro, firing at the wall as Ichigo fell to the floor injured. "There is no satisfaction in killing you now. No satisfaction at all. You need to be stronger in order for me to be satisfied. Use your Bankai," Gaara said simply. "No. I don't feel like it," Ichigo said, to Gaara's glare. The wounded Ichigo climbed out of the rubble and rose his head to face Gaara. He fired another Getsuga Tensho at Gaara, which the Privaron Espada avoided easily. The orange-haired Shinigami gave him a condescending look. "Whatever the case, you used to be an Espada, correct? That means you're not an Espada anymore. I have to beat all the Espadas sooner or later. I can't afford to go using Bankai against anyone who isn't an Espada," Ichigo shouted. Gaara said nothing. He didn't even look offended at the implication that he was weak. He closed his eyes, and Ichigo knew he was in for one hell of a ride. The Privaron simply stabbed his sword into the ground, and compressed his Ryatsu into it. The sword glowed the same color Ryatsu as its master, before it sunk into the ground like quicksand. "Berry, Mapatch," Gaara muttered, as his Ryatsu exploded outwards in a storm. Nell squealed as she jumped out of the way of the Ryatsu storm that was almost like sand, and Ichigo was forced to cover his eyes. He gasped in surprise as his foot suddenly became buried in what appeared to be sand, and he almost lost his balance. While he was struggling, the Ryatsu around Gaara began to clear. Gaara's front side remained largely unchanged save for a sand-colored bony material that covered his kneecaps. His back, however, became the spitting resemblance of a normal hollow. His shoulder blades were also covered in the stuff, which ran down and covered his back completely. His trademark gourd that he had in life took shape as well, but it had a long tendril of the sandy armor that shot up out of the gourd and connected to the back of Gaara's mask, which had expanded to cover the entire top half of his face. Gaara chuckled mercilessly, his stoic demeanor from his unreleased state now completely gone. His eyes underneath the mask were yellow and bloodshot, and they reflected the insanity that lied within. The Arrancar from before was truly gone. In its place was a truly insane Arrancar, like the visage from before was a simple shell that concealed Gaara's true nature. "Use your Bankai, Shinigami. Or else I'm going to use your life to appease the desert," he snarled menacingly. Ichigo balked at the complete 180 from the Arrancar, before he noticed a hole in the bottom of Gaara's gourd-like protrusion, which sand was pouring out of at a phenomenal rate. It was what created the sandy floor. "I told you, I can't just use Bankai on anyone who isn't an Espada," Ichigo said in resolve. Gaara sneered at him, before he leveled his claws at the Shinigami. They were huge, bulky monstrosities that seemed disproportional to the rest of Gaara's body, being easily bigger than his head. He flashed right next to Ichigo, and the Shinigami put up his sword in order to counterattack. Despite this, Gaara grabbed the blade with his bare claw, his arrow being enhanced in his resurrection, so much that it didn't even put a dent in them. He opened his mouth, and fired his Siro. This time, however, it had the consistency of sand. Ichigo stumbled back again, and got his foot caught in the sand again. Gaara held his claw open, and after a second the particles of sand were drawn up from the ground. They took the shape of a sand blade that was as tall as Ichigo, and at least a foot wide. Inch by inch, it looked like it could easily match Ichigo's butcher knife. Gaara thrust forward like a berserker, grunting as he tried to cleave through Ichigo. The young Shinigami blocked all the strikes coming from the raccoon hollow. However, Gaara's attacks were strong and heavy, and he crashed back into the wall when Gaara kicked him while he was open. "Ichigo!" Nell cried from over to the sidelines. Gaara turned his predatory glance at her, before he cracked his claws. A sadistic grin set itself upon his face, and he charged his Zero. Maybe this will make you use your Bankai, he muttered, as he launched his sandy Zero at the young-looking Aaron car. She bounced at the energy, impacted the ground next to her, just missing. If you wish to protect that child, enter your Bankai. I can't promise that nothing will happen to her if you don't. Gaara sneered, and he was already charging up another Zero. Bastard, don't you dare. Ichigo cried, as Gaara launched another Zero over at Nell. This time though, Ichigo was there to defend her, in a new, much more streamlined appearance, with a midnight black blade at his side. He had gone into his Bankai. Sorry to keep you waiting. This is my Bankai, he said, holding Nell underneath the crook of one arm. While he was defending Nell, he cleaved into Gaara, slashing part of his sand armor. Despite that, Gaara laughed and even began to drool. Interesting, truly interesting, Shinigami. Gaara clenched his fists together, and when he unclenched them, there were a couple of holes in his palms. He thrust them forward, and charged up a little bit of Ryatsu. Tormenta de Arena, he cried, as twin blasts of compressed sand shot from each palm. Ichigo dodged them easily, using his Bankai's speed to keep himself on his toes. He got underneath Gaara's guard, slashing his right shoulder as if it were butter. Gaara cried in pain, apparently still not used to the sight of his own blood. He blasted Ichigo with another Tormenta de Arena again. You damned Shinigami. I'll get you. I'll get you, he shouted. The hollowed gourd on his back released more sand, but Ichigo had since taken to hovering in the air. Gaara continued to blast Ichigo with his sand, and he poured more sand from his gourd, apparently enough for him to blast like a rocket straight up towards the Shinigami. Ichigo was ready for him. Getsuga Tensho, he shouted, the black and red Ryatsu surging from the tip of the black blade. Gaara snarled, and thought he could take it all with his enhanced arrow. He was dead wrong. It sliced through him completely, nearly bisecting him vertically. He collapsed to the ground, defeated, and after that Ichigo flashed down towards the lower level as his Bankai faded. Are you alright, Nell? He asked the childlike Arrancar, who was recovering from the attack that Gaara launched. He looked over to the other Arrancar, whose eyes were fluttering open and shut. It was a serious wound, but he wouldn't die. Sorry to worry you like that, Nell. I was stupid to think that I can't use my Bankai on anyone other than the Espada, and I put you in danger because of that, Ichigo admitted. Nell said nothing, as Ichigo was starting to look a little depressed again. Ichigo looked at the fallen Arrancar that he had defeated using his Bankai, before he shook his head and ran onwards, Nell underneath the crook of his arm. He never bothered trying to heal the Arrancar. He continued running through the palace, and after almost an hour of running he emerged into a wide room. It was relatively dim, not being very well lit, and was littered with a multitude of pillars that showed off the bizarre architecture of Las Noches. Ichigo panted for breath as he stood in the wide before he noticed a presence directly behind him. He turned around, and his eyes widened as he witnessed the form of Ulquiorra Cypher standing in the back of the room. Chad had been lucky in his run throughout Hueco He had run into a Privaron Espada, Gantenbane, Arrancar Scientocho, and had defeated him after awakening his new powers, simply because the Afro Arrancar had decided to go easy on him. He had spared Gantenbane's life after that, and made his way out underneath the sun, which surprised him greatly. There was supposed to be no sun in Hueco but regardless, it seemed like he could advance from this point onward. He looked at the unconscious Gantenbane one last time, before he moved. Gantenbane's eyes flickered open, and he noticed a presence standing over to the side. His eyes widened. Run, Sato Yasutora! Gantenbane managed to croak out. Chad turned around and regarded him, and also set his eyes upon the new arrival. Don't just stand there. Run for your life, Sato Yasutora! Gantenbane said, this time much louder. Chad had already released both of his arms, ready to attack the new opponent. Sup? I need to use you for a second, said the voice of one Uzumaki Naruto, who stood in front of Chad, his hands casually inserted into his pockets. All in all, he looked a little bored. I know this guy's Ryatsu is strong, but he looks a little frail, to be honest. Like he can't take too many hits. Rather than see what he can do, I'll just end it here in one shot. Chad thought to himself, aiming his powered-up left arm and rushing Naruto. He aimed his strongest punch he had at Naruto's face, and put everything that he had into that attack. Naruto didn't budge, not even slightly, as the powerful fist impacted with his face. "Is that it?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "That is all you've got to your attacks?" He paused. "Well, if that's the case, I guess it's safe to say you're ready for me to kill you now, right?" He cackled with mad laughter, as he removed his fists from his pockets. He flashed out of his existence, and Chad coughed up blood after Naruto jabbed his fist directly through Chad's sternum, and ripped it out with little delicacy. Chad crumpled to the floor, and his world went completely black. Kakashi himself was having a similar performance to both of his comrades. He too had entered the Trace Cipher's den, and although he had not been confronted by any Privaron Espada yet, he couldn't go long without running into one. The corridor around him was remarkably narrow, and Kakashi was uneasy, like a trap was going to activate at any moment in time, and the walls were going to enclose around him. His eyes widened, and he drew his Zanpakuto none too quickly, as his opponent crashed into him at full force, using his head to attack. Kakashi redirected the force of the blow, and threw the crazed Arrancar aside, sending him crashing into the wall. The Arrancar was getting out of the rubble though, it was clearly not enough to stop it. Kakashi glared at the odd-looking Arrancar, who was covered head to toe in what looked like a form-fitting Arrancar robe that allowed for swift movements. The thing that caught his eye though, was the mask. It covered the Arrancar's entire face, and was completely blank, giving the Arrancar the impression that he was faceless. He knew it was male though, he could tell by the physique. The Arrancar struck an over-exaggerated martial arts pose, before he used a Sonido to fly into action. Kakashi could barely follow his movements, and the obnoxious screaming from the Arrancar was throwing him off guard. The Arrancar placed his gloved hand on the ground, using the position to perform a sweep kick that was very familiar to Kakashi. The Shinigami skidded back towards the wall, and the Arrancar backflipped over his horizontal sword slash. "I see, you are a very worthy opponent, Kakashi-san. I deeply regret having to fight you, and I truly wish I did not have to fight you. However, regardless of what has passed, you and I are on different sides now. How do you know my name? Who are you?" Kakashi asked, his one eye narrowing cautiously. The Arrancar looked at the ceiling. "You will find out soon enough, but I am honored to be able to call myself Arrancar 107, he said, giving Kakashi an enthusiastic thumbs up. Kakashi sweat dropped. "This passageway is much too narrow for us to fight properly, and there is someone here who would like to see you," the Arrancar said, before a little whistle sounded in the air. "That's the signal. We must go," he shouted, before he flashed out of existence. "Wait!" Kakashi shouted, before he sheathed his sword and cursed. Using Shuinpa, he followed after the eccentric Arrancar. 1 minute later, the Arrancar flashed into a wider room similar to the one where Ichigo fought Gaara, and Kakashi soon followed after. The shinobi turned Shinigami noticed another figure present in the room, and he was surprised by how similar the two were in appearance. Overall, the other one had the same mask, the full one that covered their face completely, and it wore the same form-fitting clothes. The only difference between them is that one was slightly smaller. "I've brought back Kakashi-san," the slightly smaller one who had led him there said, in a tone that was like how a student talked to his teacher. "Whoa! That's my student," the bigger one said eccentrically. "We will defeat him together, right, sensei? Our pride as Arrancar 106 and 107 counts on it," the smaller one said in excitement, thrilled at being able to battle. "Of course. And if we are defeated, we will have to do 100 laps around Las Noches, without using our resurrección," the bigger one cried. Tears of happiness poured from out of both of the masks, and the two embraced fondly. Kakashi's eyes widened. "Wait a minute. he thought, as he noticed the shocking resemblance. Gai-sensei. Current Espada. First, Naruto Uzumaki. Second, Coyote Stark. Third, Baragon Lizenbairn. Fourth, Tia Haribel. Fifth, Ulquiorra Cypher. Sixth, Neutra Gilga. Seventh, Grimjow Jigerjax. Eighth, Zamari Ruros. Ninth, Sale Aporo Grands. 10th, Yami Largo. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you enjoyed this what if and want to see next part of it, comment down below and let me know. Also share this video with your friends. See you in the next video. Peace.